Hi everybody, I'm Kushan and welcome back to the stream. Today I'm going to be starting a brand new scenario design series for Command version 1.10, which was released yesterday. Go ahead and open up. I have already kind of set up the basics of the scenario. Um, the scenario is going to be set in the 1950s, in fact 1950 itself, so it's basically right after Korea had started, and it's going to be set in the GIUK gap, which I know we've all kind of been there and done that, but this one is going to be basically a battleship engagement using a lot of the World War II and post and right after World War II battleships, including like the Soviet October Revolution class. I'm going to have the Kronstadt class battle cruisers for the Soviets, and maybe the Stalingrads as well. I haven't really worked out the outlining of the Soviet task forces yet. But the U.S. side will have things like the Iowas, the Montanas, um, the there'll also be the British King George Fives as well as HMS Vanguard. And so I am going in kind of my style. I like having a lot of randomization in my scenarios. So what I've done here, and we'll get to the scripting for all of this later, is I've kind of outlined um, the British and U.S. forces here. Um, I'm actually, even if I scroll down a little here, I've even got an outline for potentially having some French battleships, the Riccolo and the Jean Bart, but that's going to come way later. I'm actually going to do the Soviets before I include the French. But as you can see here, I've outlined things like, Indy. There's a lot of different options. For the U.S. side, I've got basically the South Dakotas, the Iowas, and the Montanas as different options and different kind of task force compositions here. Um, I've even got the Alaska class cruisers included. So today's going to mainly be setting up the British and American forces. So it's going to be not that exciting from a gameplay perspective, but there'll be a lot of setup for the next couple of episodes to come here. So I'm going to go ahead and get to it. So most of the British groups are the difference between most of these groups is really just kind of the group composition, and I know it's some of these are really small differences between having Vanguard and a King George V class versus having two King George V class and a Vanguard and a different option, but I like having different randomization like that. I do make scenarios that I want to play, and so it's no fun when I know exactly what's coming. One of the ideas I've toyed with for the randomization for like the Soviets is to actually give potential. The thing I should note here is that I'm planning on very limited, if no, carrier air support or air support at all. There'll be a minor chance of a carrier, and in fact, one of the U.S. options does have a carrier, but I'm not planning on having the great big fast a carrier attack force that you saw in the Pacific and that you see in a lot of other scenarios featuring the GI-UK gap. All right, let's go ahead and get started here. So the first option is what I'm not actually sure I'm going to actually have in the end, but I'm going to go and set it up anyway, and that's basically the entire, what, I'm calling, the basically British home fleet, basically sailing as one massive, battle group. I'm not sure if this is actually going to make it into the final version, but the other groups are actually really based off of this. Um, and I've gone with kind of the British World War II naming for their task forces of calling them forces. So I'll go ahead and begin setting up now. So first group has the Vanguard. It's actually the first group actually has all the the British battleships in it. And so there's probably going to be a lot of non-talking on my part this go around. It's going to be, like I said, it's going to be definitely a lot of setup. Now it should be noted that The reason I'm actually building groups over here off the coast of the US is because one of the features in and how I'm going to get the randomization of these groups is that what'll happen is I think it was version 1.08 or 109 that they introduced the ability to switch um, unit sides. So what I'll have is I'll have all the possible options for groups kind of for at least for the allies sitting here off kind of the coast of the US. And then what'll happen is that one of the scripts, that basically in the startup script that'll run will actually change a group side and then it'll get teleported into the ops area. And all those groups and for options that didn't get rolled will just kind of be sitting off over here, unused. So we've got the 5 British battleships. We are going to just kind of put them in kind of a battle line, I think. I think that's a little too far, though. I want to kind of have this. Yeah, about 5 or 6 nautical miles. Probably okay for what we're going to need here. Oh, come on. And they don't need to be in perfect alignment, but... And then we've got some Crown Colony class cruisers, which I believe was the Newfound one, and the database. Now, the Crown Colony were a class of light cruisers, and they were the Newfound one. And we've got 4 of these. Now, what I'm doing now is I'm not too concerned about things like spacing and such. I'll come back later and I'll adjust the groups kind of spacing and all of that, but I really just want to get these groups kind of formed up. And then the next kind of mini group here of this home fleet will be Dido class cruisers, or Ditto class. So we've got the Argonaut, the Sirius, the Royalist, and the Black Prince, and there are 2 different possible ones in the database for the Ditto class, the Cleopatra and the Euryalus. So I'm actually gonna go and look up on Wikipedia here. If I can pull up the right window. Okay, so we are using the So we've got Cleopatra and Euryalus. So it really doesn't matter. They're both. Doesn't look like there's too big of a difference between these two. As far as according to Wikipedia, they weren't like a different kind of subclasses or anything within the main overall class of ships. Yeah, it looks like they're about the same. It looks like they've got the same kind of mounts. Yeah, torpedo tubes. Yeah. Okay, so we'll just go ahead and just use the Cleopatras. And I'll come back through. One of the other things I'll do is I'll come back and kind of rename these as required. And actually, one thing I want to look at, I want to make sure that there was no additions in this patch. Oh, I'm looking at aircraft. Ships. Because there was a subgroup of this class of ship, the Bellona group. Oh, Bologna was given to New Zealand, 1946 to 1956. New Zealand, Royalist. Oh, looks like this entire group was actually New Zealand class cruisers, or were New Zealand Navy ships. Well, in that case, I'll have to come back and I'll actually have to rename these, but that's fine. So I'm gonna put the light cruisers. These are light cruisers, so they would typically have been either scouts or S or kind of screening units. And then we are looking for battle class destroyers as our next. And there were. So what I've done actually over here is, you haven't noticed, I have kind of laid out most of the units. So we've got the early and the late, early war and late war. All right. So we are using got bar 4. Just kind of reading up real quick. Um, just looking up on the battle class destroyer here, because there was early and a late war version of these. The Australian battle class, 1943 or later battle class. The first 16 ships were ordered in early 1943. Um, I'll come back and actually fix that after the stream. I'm going to get too distracted. For now, we'll just use late classes. Actually, we'll use earlies. So we should have 16. 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and we'll just say like 16. There we go. We'll fix the formation again later, and that'll complete our home fleet task force. Although I think these destroyers are, like I said, way too split out for the era. These things I think would have been, they're 30 nautical miles out. I think these would have been in much, much closer. But I'll go ahead and adjust formations after the stream. And we don't want to get too bogged down on that. Alright, so the next group, Duke of York, Anson, Howe. Okay, I did use. Okay, so the next ones are, we have the King George. Actually, let's select all of this, group it, rename complete. The next one has the King George V and the Howe. we've got a couple of Crown Colony class cruisers, the Nigeria, the Jamaica, and the Ceylon, Bermuda. Ships would have been in much closer, I think, in this day and age than what escorts typically are now. So put 4 cruisers, and then we have a flotilla of battle class destroyers. Again, we'll just go ahead and use the early ones, and I'll swap them out later. And a flotilla would be 8. Now, I do want to go into the yep, I want to switch the King George V as the group lead. And we'll call this Force G. Now, should be noted that Force G here is actually used in a couple of options. And so there won't really be a, so I only have to create it once. Cold War 12, I have not got to the Americans yet. I've just started on the British. So the next group is Force H, which is the Duke of York and Anson. And then we'll have Dido class. We'll just use the Cleopatra. So there's our cruisers. And again, another flotilla of 8 destroyers. So Duke of York is the lead. This will be Force H. Now for the British, I've actually have only 4 different options, whereas the Americans, I think I have like 5. The Americans are actually a lot less concentrated. I think on one of theirs is like like 4 separate task groups. And I think the reasoning behind that would be that I think the Americans would probably have, or at least the U.S. would have, a lot more scattered forces, a lot more obligations. Whereas I think the British, in the late 40s, right before they retired their battleships, most of them were actually already in home waters. So it's not, I don't think it's unrealistic that they would actually potentially sail together. Oh, let's see. Next option will be our next task group. We did Force H, so we'll need the Vanguard. Now the Vanguard here is actually the last British battleship built. I think there was 4 planned, but only 1 ever got finished. I've always loved British battleships. All right, so we've got the that. We got Vanguard and then Duke of York. Um, Oliver, the scenario objective here is basically the Soviet battleships are attempting to basically do what the Germans did with their heavy units, in that they're trying to break them through the GIUK gap, basically into the trade lanes, and basically use them as commerce raiders. Whereas the U.S. And the players that it's only playable from the ally side. Well, basically the player will have to basically try to engage them. Oh no, this is very, very much ahistorical. This is not trying to recreate anything. I'm gonna have Montana, potentials for Montana class battleships actually in here, which were never actually built, but these would have rivaled the Yamato in size. Yeah, 4 turns of 406 millimeter and triple turrets. This is Oliver. This is gonna be set in 1950. So it's right. I wanted a year that was like right at the cusp, kind of the jet age, where it wasn't, where you'd still find like because there is going to be potentials for some carriers, although not, a huge amount. And so I wanted like the potential for, there still to be kind of, old World War II equipment still around, but not quite where and it's still something where, area isn't quite as dominant. There still is the potential for surface actions. And I think it'd be good. 1950s, summer of 1950 is good because the Korean War is pretty much is just kind of started, and so there's most of the U.S. fleet would actually be kind of off in the Pacific, so it was kind of a good way to kind of explain off the lack of carriers in the Atlantic. All right, so where was I? Just placed the Dido class cruisers here, and I need battle class. Go. This force. That's force K. Couldn't really find any hard naming conventions for the British after World War II, so I just went with their force structure that they had set up during World War II. All right, so the next group is actually force K here. Oh, oh, can't copy a group. But what I can do is save it. Force K. Save. Then what I can do is move this, delete the group, and reload it, because then did I not click? Oh, oops. I loaded something else. No, not loading at all. That's strange. I was pretty sure I saved that.
just going to open up the import file here. Okay, that's strange. There is
a file, and it does exist. It's for whatever reason just not loading the units. Force H, force G. Loads file main. Whatever reason, it's not wanting to load this script at all. Alright, that's really strange. Says it's loaded. It's just not actually loading anything, so that may actually be a bug in version 1.11. I don't remember seeing it though, so I'm gonna reselect that. And then really doesn't matter where these guys go, but let's try resaving this out. Let's then move this, rename that, force Z, so we don't have two. That's strange, it says it's loading, but it's not actually loading an import. That's interesting. I haven't actually seen it do that before. Is it not loading any imports? That would be bad. So let's go to Cold War Iceland. Okay, so it did load those, so there must be something about my import that it's not liking, so I'll go ahead and look into that later. Never actually seen it not load an import file before. Alright, so anyways. So what we need for our next option is we're gonna, basically it's the same as what we just did, except it includes the Vanguard. So we've got Vanguard, we've got Duke of York, and we've got Howe, or no, I'm sorry, we've got Anson. And then we've got some battle class destroyers. And this is going to be called Force Z. And that actually completes the
British options. I'm going to go ahead and take a quick break here, and I'm going to go refill my drink, and then I'll be right back, and we'll go ahead and do the US. All right, I am back, and let's go ahead and get the US options set up. So the first one is all four of the Iowa class. So we got Iowa, the New York or New Jersey, Missouri, and Wisconsin. And again, like I said, I will come back and I will go ahead and readjust these formations later. Because 12 nautical miles, I think, is way. I'll go ahead and do these guys at least now. Calls up the formation. And then we've got two of the Alaska class battle, or not battle cruisers. It's tempted to call it the Alaska class battle cruisers, but in reality, they were just really oversized heavy cruisers. As they did mount just normal cruiser, I think 8-inch guns. They didn't, whereas like a battle cruiser would actually be equipped with like battleship um, guns, 14, 15, 16-inch. So we'll have, so in this group we've got two Alaskas. I'll go ahead and put, I'm not actually sure where you'd put like the heavy cruisers. I think they'd be in kind of a screening spot, so we'll put them out on either flank.